Bienvenidos a Watch, Review, Repeat. Este es el podcast donde dos mejores amigos discuten lo último en cine y televisión. Entonces hazlo todo de nuevo la semana siguiente. Me llamo Colton Brown y conmigo es Andrew Meadows.
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Bien, gracias. En este episodio estamos hablando de la trilogía de Guillermo del Toro, que incluye Cronos, El Espinazo del Diablo y El Laberinto del Fauno. ¿Estás emocionado de hablar de estas películas?
What?
¿No hablas español?
No.
Oh. Well, then I guess we'll just have to speak in English for the rest of the episode, huh?
It was quite impressive, though. I'm pretty impressed.
Yeah, I think I might have fucked up a few words here and there, but it's admittedly it's been close to a decade since I've spoken any Spanish with any sort of regularity, and it's not like I was exactly fluent in it back in the day, so I had a little help. I had to, I prepared that a little bit ahead of time, so I had something to read off of just to give the listeners a little bit of insight on that. But it's appropriate that we begin with some Spanish for this episode because we're talking about 3 Spanish language films. I actually already introduced what we're talking about this episode, but I figured that would probably fly over most people's heads. So we are talking about 3 Spanish language films from director Guillermo del Toro on this episode.
Guillermo del Toro.
Yes, that is the man of the hour. He is one of our favorite directors, I would say. I don't want to speak on your behalf, but I think that's a fair statement. Yeah. So there's actually this Criterion Collection box set. I don't know exactly when it was released. I think within the past couple of years. I picked it up a little while back when they usually do their 50% off sales. It's a beautiful set, and it contains 3 films. Cronos, The Devil's Backbone, and Pan's Labyrinth. Those are the English names for them. Cronos remains the same. And it's a beautiful box set. It has like this big booklet with essays and the kind of stuff about the movies, and it's just got this beautiful art on it. And I actually got it for you as a birthday gift.
You did. Year. I remember when I first saw the one you got, I was completely enamored by it. I thought it was totally awesome. It was a very good birthday gift. Thank you again.
Well, you are welcome, and it was good inspiration for choosing the topic for this bonus episode. It is bonus episode number 9 that we're talking about here.
Number 9.
I guess it kind of fits the vibe. I'll allow it. Just to get everyone up to speed on how our bonus episodes work, if they're not already familiar with it. They are timed exclusive for our Patreon supporters. So our Patreon is available at watchreviewrepeat.com, clicking the premium tab and then clicking the become a patron button. How it works is $2 a month gets you, again, access to all these timed exclusive bonus episodes, as well as early access to our regular episodes. So it's pretty cool. And you get to be the first to listen to sweet bonus episodes like this, where we can pick any topic of our choosing, things that we really, really want to talk about. That's why we're here now, because we really, really want to talk about some Guillermo del Toro goodness.
That's it.
So if you are a supporter on Patreon and you're listening to this, within that timed exclusivity window, we thank you for your support. If you're not a supporter, it's never too late. It's never too late to jump on the train. Again, just kind of follow those simple instructions I gave you just a minute ago, and you'll be well on your way. So, having said all of that, I think we can get a little bit deeper into what we're talking about. Now, before we get into the movies themselves, since I did kind of mention that Del Toro is one of our favorite directors, I think it's worth talking about the man himself for maybe just a couple minutes.
Yeah,
because I've watched interviews with him, any sort of dialogue that he, has with anyone. He's a really compelling person to watch. He's someone that's just incredibly passionate about his work, and you can tell that he has like these strong influences that were made on him throughout his life that he kind of infuses into his work. He's a really fascinating person.
Absolutely.
And I think that shows in all of his movies. I think especially in the movies that we're going to talk about today, because I think those are some of the more personal movies. Like, I think he kind of has like a personal type of film that he does, and then maybe more of like a Hollywoodized type movie that he does, which he's also very good at. But I think it's kind of a different kind of approach that he takes with movies like that. So in terms of filmography, Cronos is the first film he ever did. We're going to talk about that very shortly. 1993 is when it came out. And then he did Mimic, which I think is widely considered his worst film. And I think that he also kind of has a similar feeling. I think that one was a very kind of troubled production. And I think that was his first foray into the Hollywood film system. And I don't think it was as successful as I think he would have wanted it to be. But it didn't deter him. Devil's Backbone, again, another one we're going to be talking about today. That was his next one, 2001. That one I think kind of slots more into the personal style. And then Blade 2 and Hellboy, 2002 and 2004, definitely swinging hard in the opposite direction. Those are definitely, both of those are superhero films, sort of. I mean, I guess, Blade is a Marvel character. Hellboy, I think, is
Dark Horse, right?
Dark Horse, yeah, I think you're right. Yep, good call. Pan's Labyrinth, 2006. Going to be talking about that one today. Very excited to talk about that one. I think that's probably his most recognizable Spanish language film. And
it also got his foot in the door. I mean, I think he won. I think, I should have the Wikipedia pages up. I want to say that won awards.
It
Academy
did.
Awards.
I think it won technical awards more so than kind of maybe the more bigger awards. Another one of his films, it did end up scoring a pretty big Academy Award win, and we'll get there. He did Hellboy 2: The Golden Army in 2008, sequel to Hellboy, obviously. Pacific Rim in 2013. I adore that film. I think it's a ton of fun, and it is fucking beautiful on 4K as a side note. Crimson Peak, 2015. It's a film for me that kind of came and went. Not one of my favorites in his filmography, but then Shape of Water in 2017.
Holy shit.
We did an episode on that. I think actually the very beginning of this year. Came out, I think, late last year.
And that one certainly won awards.
That one won many awards. I think it actually won Best Picture, if I'm not mistaken, at the Academy Awards, amongst other things. I think he ended up winning Best Director, Best Production Design, and Best Original Score. So it did extremely well.
And it also set a precedent, right? Like those types of films aren't normally recognized within that award sector. Is that right? I heard that in an interview anyways, somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's probably what you would traditionally think of. I mean, I think I think that there's kind of an Oscar bait type feel to a lot of award winners, and that's not always the case. And sometimes I think that that's kind of speaking more pejoratively than is necessary about some movies that are really good. But yeah, I would say that's fair. It's a movie about a man, or I should say a fish man and a lady. And you don't really have a lot of movies kind of that fall into that type of category that end up getting that sort of recognition. So yeah, I'd say that's fair. But he likes his fishmen, he likes his creatures, he likes his monsters. He likes using kind of elements of fairy tales, horror, like makeup, a lot of practical kind of makeup, a lot of practical effects work. I think you can kind of find that in more or less every movie that he's done.
Yeah, it's like a trademark thing of his.
Yeah. And
he's really spectacular. Go ahead. Yep.
I just read that apparently he's collectively with Alfonso Cuarón and Alejandro Iñárritu known as one of the three amigos of cinema, and those are two very talented Mexican filmmakers, both who have also, I think, had films, or I think they've both been awarded the Best Director at the Academy Awards for various points. I think Cuarón won for Gravity, and I think Iñárritu won for, I think, Birdman. So
right,
that's a fucking trio right there. Let's put it that way. But anyway, you were saying?
Yeah, he's I think he's probably one of the best at world building. It doesn't matter what movie you watch, whether you're a huge fan of it or not. The settings and the just the authenticity of the world the characters are in, it feels very, very authentic. And like I said, it doesn't matter what movie you pick out. You pick out any movie in his filmography, and it's very realized and flushed out. And I don't know. I think that's probably what makes him so good, is just the extent at which he goes to create the characters and the world that they're in. It's very realized. It's super awesome. If you've never watched any of his movies, I highly recommend you start. You could start with Pacific Rim, or you can start with, I think, what was the Crimson Peak? I think was probably one that probably quite a few people got into because they thought it was maybe a horror movie or something like that. But it's cool. He's a very talented man. He's super interesting. I actually, in preparation for this, I actually watched, I can't remember where I watched it. But he, apparently his father was kidnapped, I think, when he was filming The Mimic. And our boy James Cameron, he got kidnapped for ransom, and James Cameron ponied up the bounty to get, or not the bounty, but the ransom money to get him out. And then he moved. I think he moved into California at that point. He moved out of Mexico after that happened. And I think that happened between Mimic and whatever came next. But I had no idea about that until I started reading about it. Have you ever heard that?
I actually had no idea that was a thing, but I'm looking at his page now, and I see that there. Yeah, that's wow.
I think he became friends with Cameron, I think, on Mimic or something. I can't, or was it Cronos? I'm not sure when he met.
It says they met during Cronos.
Yeah, okay, and they became real close friends. And I think the ransom was like $1 million, and Guillermo didn't have it. He just started filmmaking and stuff, and yeah, James Cameron helped him out, and they got his dad, and he moved out of Mexico and started filmmaking. And it's crazy. He actually got his start. He opened up in Mexico City. He opened up a special effects studio. Did gore and makeup and everything else, and that's kind of where he kind of started. Then he made Cronos, and it's an incredibly humble beginning, and it's awesome to see somebody kind of soar with what they want to do. I think his family was pretty wealthy in Mexico. But he started off with an effects studio, and then slowly began to build up his resume. And it's a really awesome story, and he's an awesome filmmaker. And I don't know, he's definitely one of my favorite. He's really, like you said, he's a really fascinating guy. It's very cool. Lack of better words. Anyways, moving forward.
We've paid, I think, enough lip service to the man, but we're gonna do another. I don't know how long this is going to be, but maybe a couple hours of it, because we've got 3 fantastic films to talk about. I don't think that's spoiling anything to say that these are going to be really good films that we're talking about. I will say that I'll give you an actual spoiler warning that we're not going to do non-spoilers. We're just going to do a full spoiler discussion for all 3 of these movies. They've all been around for
many years,
at least a decade, some 2 decades. So
some almost 3 decades.
I strongly urge anyone to watch them. I think these are all definitely worth a watch. And again, these are a little bit different than kind of, The Shape of Water might be one of the more approachable films that he's done. And obviously that's recent. Some people tend to like more recent things rather than older things. I think all of these films have aged very well. But if we're going to start, I would say The Shape of Water might be a good starting point, because that's a very... it feels very authentic Del Toro, and I think that's honestly why it worked so well, is because he kind of he made it as authentic as any other project that he's done in his life. So, with all that said, let's talk about Cronos, released in Mexico December 3rd, 1993. This is a Mexican production. It was written and directed by the man himself, Guillermo del Toro. Stars Federico Lupi, Ron Perlman, Claudio Brook, Margarita Isabel, and Tamara Shaneth. A mysterious device designed to provide its owner with eternal life resurfaces after 400 years, leaving a trail of destruction in its path. So, Cronos is a movie that for the longest time I had not seen. So, I have now seen Cronos exactly once.
I'm excited to talk about it.
This is a movie that you encouraged me to see for the longest time, and I feel a little bit ashamed to admit that I kind of put it off for so long. I think I actually borrowed your Blu-ray at one point, if I'm not mistaken, and then
never watched it.
But if this, if doing this episode did any one thing for us, it forced my hand. It said, you have to watch Cronos right now, and like I said, I'm ashamed that I waited so long because it's a damn fine film. You know, even early days, first feature film Guillermo del Toro, it feels like pure Del Toro goodness. You know, maybe it's not as refined as some of his later films, but it's really captivating, really interesting story, really intricate kind of world that he's built, and kind of the elements. I mean, you know, it's basically a different take on vampirism, which I think is actually very interesting.
Yes.
So I was really, really impressed with Cronos, and I know, obviously, you encouraging me for the longest time, to me, implies that you were also a fan of this film.
Yeah, I think this is the first. This is the first movie that I think, because Ron Perlman and Guillermo del Toro, they worked together throughout a couple of movies, and I think this is his first. This is the first. Well, it's his first movie, so of course it's the first time him and Ron Perlman worked together. But this was actually my first Cronos film. My first Criterion movie.
Okay.
My first Criterion movie, and all the Criterion films, they all come with literature and stuff. When you buy them, they come with small little booklets inside the case, and they explain different things. And I remember being completely blown away by the thing that I bought, the Blu-ray, when I first bought it. And I recommended you to watch it, and well, I'm glad you finally did. But I think vampires are cool, and I really, really enjoyed his take on vampires in this, and it's kind of, I think Pan's Labyrinth is the first time I was exposed to Guillermo del Toro. So, but this is, I don't know. I remember seeing, I remember you used to go to Blockbuster, I'm sure, yeah.
Back in the day, yeah.
Okay, I remember seeing the cover to this, and it's vivid. And I remember, I think that on the VCR, on the VHS cover, you had the Cronos device, and then you had blood dripping off of it. And I remember seeing it as a kid, and I never knew what it was. And then I saw it. I went through this period at my dad's house where I would just buy a bunch of movies and watch them and whatnot. And I remember seeing this it was recommended on Amazon, and I picked it up. I picked up the Criterion one, and I was blown away. I was super pumped about it. And the device itself, I think the intricacy of that thing, the Cronos device, I got a thing for like Hellraiser has the puzzle box, you know? And
the box.
Yes.
You opened it.
And I don't know what it is. It's this weird fascination with little props like that I think are just incredibly fascinating. Mm-hmm. And like I said, the intricacy of the way this thing was built and the way it looked, and just, it's very fleshed out, man, you know? And it's fucking awesome. I just really like it. I really enjoyed it.
I think it's pretty wild how there's like the insect or something that's kind of living within it, that's kind of what seems to be giving it its power, and then obviously it kind of has to, like, it seems like it needs the blood to kind of stay alive and to be able to offer like the eternal life or whatever. I agree. It's like, it's this really, really fascinating thing, and it's just kind of like, how does he come up with something like this? Like, I don't know. It's really inventive, and it's really creative.
And this one, I don't know. This is kind of like your first exposure to his kind of like makeup style with, you know, when he dies, after the guy pushes him down off of the ledge in the car, you know, and he's got that, like, his skin's peeling, but he's not drinking blood. So his flesh is all like white and shit. And, I don't know, man. It's really fucking good. You got to take over, because I'm losing talking points.
Yeah, well, you actually kind of see. I really like the introduction to this movie. You know, it begins in the 1500s, and you see, I think, the alchemist that I think develops the actual Cronos device, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, you kind of see like him, and then like you see him. I think he's like you see him in like 1900 or something like that, and he's been stabbed, and it actually kind of fatally kills him, I think, because he's been stabbed through the heart.
Yeah, the earthquake. There was an earthquake, and then at the basement of this earthquake, he was in like the basement of like a skyscraper, and this earthquake leveled this building, and he was mortally wounded, and and then the device went missing for years. It's so fucking cool, man. I get excited talking about it.
Yeah, no, I mean like just the way that the beginning shows that passage of time, like it's a very short sequence of maybe a few minutes, but it tells you pretty much all you need to know right away. I think there is a little bit of narration as well, to be fair, but the actual, I think the visuals of it stick out, just like his marble white skin is very apparent. Obviously, you see that with Jesus later in the movie, like you said, as it's kind of like his regular flesh kind of peels away to reveal that underneath. It's really striking looking, and I think that the effects work holds up quite a bit. I think a lot of it was practically done. I think that helps, but it's really interesting to basically see Jesus kind of progress throughout the movie. Where like in the beginning, he's this regular looking man, and then he kind of, he shaves the mustache off at one point, and then like he just gradually becomes more and more fucked up looking, kind of more corrupted by the device, and eventually kind of looks monstrous by the end. But I think this is something that's true of all three movies that we're talking about. The monster in Del Toro's movies is pretty much always the good guy. Like he's
always the misunderstood one. Yeah,
right. He doesn't really have a tendency to make like this quote unquote ugly thing like the villain. Like he always wants the audience to sympathize with these characters, and he gives them a lot of depth that a lot of movies would just kind of whatever, and it's true, I think, of other movies. I think Hellboy especially, the whole thing is everyone in like the bureau is kind of weird, things that people look at and kind of be fearful of. And I think that's definitely true here. But I think it works because you start with Jesus as this kind of normal figure, very grounded figure, and he's with his granddaughter throughout most of the movie. And, she never really sees him as anything but her grandfather.
Yeah, it's very
and
touching.
I think it's really beautiful the way they have that relationship there. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Del Toro, I tried to consume some of the like supplemental materials on the discs. I didn't get a chance to do it for Pan's Labyrinth just because I was kind of rushed a little bit to watch that and have time to record, and other personal responsibilities that I have. But I think he basically said in one of the interviews, I think on the disc, that the Jesus character and like the relationship that he had with his granddaughter is kind of mirroring his Del Toro's relationship with his grandmother. So it's kind of reversed, obviously in terms of kind of the dynamic there. But I think that's why I think the relationship feels so genuine, so authentic. Yeah. It's because he put a lot of himself into the characters, he put a lot of himself into kind of the story, and then added, these layers of the fantastical elements that maybe make it seem like a more cinematic approach or something, a little bit more striking than just kind of this personal relationship. But I don't think any of that works if you don't start with that core of something that is very emotional, that's very real. Right. I think I've probably said it a million times already, but I think that's what Del Toro is an expert at, is making maybe two things that seem disparate blend together in ways I don't think you ever would have expected them to.
Right.
And I think it's especially evident in the next two movies that we'll talk about. So I won't jump ahead of myself there, but this movie's got a lot of great stuff for it. And movie made in 1993, budget of $2 million. Doesn't feel like it. I don't think. No, I think it absolutely holds up to this day. And I thought it was a really beautiful movie. Yeah, like I said, I wish I'd watched it sooner. It would be nice to have seen this a few more times so I could get a little bit more out of it, other than just the initial response of like, "Damn, this is good," So that's kind of where I'm at with it. Is, damn, this was good. It'll definitely be one that I rewatch in the future at some point. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's I think it's the it's a very it's it's cool.
It is a very cool movie.
I think it's kind of one of his slower movies. I think it's slower than some of the other ones, and it takes a while to ramp up. I don't necessarily think that this movie's for everybody, but I think if you get an introduction to a good, strong introduction to Del Toro, and you kind of want to look more into his library, I think Cronos is definitely a good place to go. I think you'll probably enjoy it if you enjoy his style of filmmaking, because this is almost like it's like you said before, it's probably not the most refined movie he has. But it's probably one of the most raw movies he has. I think it's very I think raw is probably a good word. It might be a little rough around the edges and stuff, but it's got very compelling characters. It has very compelling story elements. And I think it's paced well. It's like I said, I think it might be a little bit more of a slow burn compared to some of the other movies we're going to be talking about tonight.
Yeah, I think that's overall fair. I mean, it is his first movie, again, made on a micro budget, so it has its limitations. But I think that even if it wasn't the movie that he would have made if he had 10 times the budget, I think that sometimes having restrictions in place kind of forces you to be creative in the filmmaking process. And I think that directors like Del Toro, people that have that sort of vision and what they do, they can pretty much achieve anything that they really want to, even if it's somewhat short of kind of their grandeur expectations. I think that the fact that he can take the limitations and make a product as compelling as this, I think speaks to his ability as a director.
When he's in the scope of the movie, like when his heart's in it. Because like we talked about before, there are other movies I think that you can feel like I feel like there's a little bit less heart there. Not that they're bad or anything, but they're just not these three.
Well, I think there's a level of detachment. I think there's the separation where this, as I said, it's based on a relationship he himself had with his grandmother. So it's very personal to begin with. And I think that isn't necessarily the case in a Pacific Rim, for instance, which again, I think is phenomenal. I enjoy that film a lot, but I don't think it has a personal touch like this one does, and I think it misses that. I think it could benefit from something like that, but it's not the type of movie I don't think that's really designed to sustain
it's
something
not
like
required, that. Right? What was your favorite moment in this one?
My favorite moment in this, I think it would probably be the bathroom sequence, actually.
Where he's lapping blood off the floor?
Yeah, so the guy has the nosebleed. It's just the whole kind of the setup of it, he I think it's been kind of established. I think there was like the meat in the fridge where he was just like I need some of that.
Right.
And I think that, when he sees the guy with the nosebleed, and then he just kind of follows him into the bathroom, and then there's kind of the bait and switch where the guy cleans it up, and he's like, motherfucker. And then to him finally getting just like a drop of blood on the floor, and he literally laps it off the floor with his tongue. And like, it's this kind of grotesque kind of thing, but it does a really... It's kind of the Del Toro thing of something that kind of weirds you out, but it's actually really compelling and interesting at the same time.
Right.
So I thought that was a really good moment. I don't think I shouted out Federico Lupi as much as I should have. He's great in this film.
Yeah.
As Jesus, and Ron Perlman is also quite entertaining as Angel, I would say. I like those two. I think played off each other very well. Very different characters, obviously, but as someone that is familiar with Ron Perlman's work, obviously since this movie came out, it's fun to see him, in the early '90s playing a character like this, and even at the close to the beginning of his acting career, the dude is great. Is consistently great. So I appreciated that, but. I would say that would be my favorite moment. Again, if I watched it few more times, maybe that'd change. But that's just kind of the first thing that came to mind. Like that's
Right.
I that was just my gut reaction. So, what would you say your favorite moment is?
I think my favorite moment, I got a couple different favorite moments. The most touching moment, I think, is when the granddaughter hides the device and she goes and hides in the roof.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're he's trying to figure out what the fuck's going on here. And his granddaughter's scared, and I don't know. I thought that was real touching. But I think probably one of my favorite moments is when he first gets the device, and he's holding it there, and he twists it, and you get I have a weird fascination with the actual thing. I think it's really cool, and he's turning the jewel, and it starts to tick. It's all the clockwork and everything starts working, and then it hits him in the wrist. And everybody starts freaking out, and then he realizes that he wakes up the next day, and he looks younger, so he shaves off his mustache.
Right. Yeah.
It's pretty cool. I like it. That's probably my two favorite moments in it.
I did like when he kind of uses it in the middle of the night.
Oh, on his chest.
Yeah. That was a good moment too. His granddaughter's just like,
what the fuck?
What's going on here? She's all right with it. She's a faithful granddaughter. She stays by her grandpappy's side even when he's got very, very white skin.
That's it.
It's a good movie. It's a great movie. And I think it's a movie that kind of set the stage for Del Toro to be able to make this next movie that we're going to talk about. And that is The Devil's Backbone, El Espinazo del Diablo, which was released in April of 2001. It was a Spanish and Mexican co-production. It was written by Del Toro along with David Munoz and Antonio Trashoras. Of course, Del Toro directed it. It stars Marisa Paredes, Eduardo Noriega, Federico Lupi, again, Fernando Tielve, and Inigo Garces. In the final year of the Spanish Civil War, a 12-year-old boy arrives at an ominous orphanage hiding many dark secrets. Devil's Backbone, I think it was kind of, if I'm not mistaken, it might have been the opposite scenario here, where I think I watched this movie and encouraged you to watch it, and then you actually listened to my advice and did watch it, I think, relatively soon after that.
I think the first time I watched it with you.
Okay, maybe that's what it was. I don't know if I'd seen it at that point then. I'm not sure. I think maybe I had already seen it once, and that's maybe kind of why you wanted you to watch it.
Yeah.
That seems to be my recollection of it, but I also seem to recall watching it with you now that you mentioned that, which that would have been a good while ago. So we rewatched it for the sake of this episode, and
it was still really good.
Yeah, I would say so. I was really, really impressed with this film. I've been impressed with this film, I think, every time I've seen it. And I think you kind of touched on it already. I think Pan's Labyrinth was probably the first Spanish language film that we saw that Del Toro did. And I think that was probably the inspiration, at least for me, to go back. I think I ended up watching this movie because of Pan's Labyrinth, I think probably around the time that came out. So I think that was probably the first time I saw this movie. It was probably mid-2000s, somewhere around there.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, you saw it a long time ago.
Well, you probably saw it not too far after that, though, But it's like I said, it's been a while since I've seen this for the first time. And it's also really been a while since I'd seen it in general. Probably at least a few years since I'd seen it last. This is another movie that I think absolutely holds up, Came out in 2001, so yeah, it's 17 years old or whatever. But this to me, it feels like a refinement of Del Toro's kind of sensibilities. Like I think that this to me felt more like him being able to make exactly the movie that he wanted. Like, it didn't have a big budget or anything like that, but it felt like
it had enough.
It was pure, unadulterated Del Toro, and it was infused with that same heart, with that same personal touch, and then it has the twist in it. It has a ghost story, but again, as is tradition for Del Toro, the ghost isn't a bad guy.
Right.
The ghost is even though it's played for horror aspects, I think, throughout the duration of the movie, because understandably the kids in this orphanage are kind of scared shitless by this ghost that seems to be haunting them. There's a pretty heartbreaking backstory for the ghost, for Santi, and it kind of comes around in a big way by the end, with how that story ties in with the characters that we come to appreciate throughout the movie, and how it ties in with ultimately the villain of this movie. And I think that in general, just taking a step back here, The Devil's Backbone and Pan's Labyrinth are extremely similar films. I think that Del Toro himself has basically said as much. He sees kind of The Devil's Backbone as like the boys' kind of version of it, whereas Pan's Labyrinth is kind of the girls' version. Not in the sense that it's targeted, I think, for boys, or it's targeted for girls, but the main character in this is a 12-year-old boy, and I think in Pan's Labyrinth, I don't know how old Ophelia is. I think she's around the same age, though.
Right.
She's a young girl. So I think that they kind of have that unique blend, but very similar backdrops. I think this one's the last year of the Spanish Civil War, whereas I think Pan's Labyrinth is like 5 years after the Civil War has ended, but there's still, this through line of the fascism kind of creeping in or being completely omnipresent, as is the case in Pan's Labyrinth. But it's that juxtaposition between this kind of really, really horrible setting, oppressive setting, I guess maybe is a better way to put it, and just kind of the youthful innocence,
right?
And you kind of slap those two things together, and you get a really sweet, touching story that still has the human horror to all of it. And both of these movies have very human villains to them, that makes the villain that much more, I think, maybe powerful, maybe more affecting,
right?
Because they're the type of thing that you see, that we see currently, in life. And I think that adds just another kind of dimension to the emotional impact that both of these movies have. So all that is to say that this is a phenomenal film. I think it's really compelling. I think that's really, really quite astonishing what he did with this movie. Agree? Disagree? What do you think?
No, completely agree. I think one of my favorite things about this movie, this one has the colors in this the color in this movie is really striking. It's the first time I watched it on my TV in the bedroom, and it was the orange and everything.
Yeah. This is something that Del Toro talked about, is that there's a lot of strong uses of amber and kind of the color for most of the orphanage, and then it kind of goes more, I think, towards like greens and stuff like that, like during the nighttime settings. But
right.
Honestly, that's probably true of any Del Toro film, is that he has very distinct color palettes that I think he tends to use, and they tend to make for extremely beautiful films, extremely well shot films. It's true of Cronos. I think it's even more true of this movie and Pan when we get to it. As he continues to make movies, I think it continues to escalate. He continues to refine himself. Yeah, and I guess it's no different than any other job, where
it's true.
Theoretically, the more you do it, the better you get at it, and maybe that's true. Maybe we'll get to it when we talk about Pan, but. If nothing else, certainly coming directly from Cronos to this, I've never actually seen Mimic, so I can't speak to how it looks, what its quality is, or anything like that. But coming from Mimic, 8 years prior, there's definitely a lot of development, I think, that you can actually see, in this movie, and the way that it's shot, and the way that it plays. So.
And I really enjoyed the tension in this one. Cronos had tension, don't get me wrong, but this was completely different. And it wasn't. It's not like, hey, listen, there's a tension because there might be a ghost in this orphanage. There's a giant fucking bomb in the middle of a courtyard.
Yeah,
giant bomb.
Yeah,
and that. the visual nuances and the way that the story's told. I think it's got a lot of dynamics in it, and I think it's awesome. I think that's probably what makes this one so. That's probably my favorite aspect of the movie is how there's parallels told within the story, and a lot of that stuff is visual storytelling, and it's really good. And I found that sort of stuff really striking in this one. I never drew the parallels though between Pan's Labyrinth and the Devil's Backbone. I never did that. Now that you bring that up, it's interesting.
Well, I mean, I think if nothing else, in terms of the setting, I think there's obvious similarities there. But like I said, I think it's sure. I think it's the way that they use the setting as a backdrop for the fantastic story that it's trying to tell. Fantastic in both meanings of the word. In the fairy tale aspect of it. I guess that's more in Pan. This one, it has supernatural elements to it, shall we say, and they're both really well done. That's the other meaning of the word. But I think it works so well. And I kind of already think a little bit got to this, but I think that the human villain in this is very compelling.
Yeah, he's real. He's a real fucking
he is a real shithead. There's no doubt about that. But I think maybe he's more sympathetic than Capitan Vidal and Pan's Labyrinth is. He's someone that I think basically was raised at this orphanage and kind of has this backstory. I don't think we get too much of it, but I think that there's something. He seems like he gets radicalized at some point, kind of throughout his life. Whether it's just because it's just a shitty time at the orphanage or something like that. But there's this real resentment that he has towards basically the people around him, and I think that with the burgeoning fascism of that era, that the time that this movie is set in, like that's kind of how Jacinto becomes the monster of this movie. Not the ghost. And I actually forgot how fucking dark this movie gets. When he blows up the orphanage, there's a lot of dead kids and dead kids on screen too. And I was just like, holy fuck, I didn't remember this happening. Like I think I remembered it going up in flames, but not the actual immediate aftermath where a good chunk of the cast kind of gets killed there, or some, or close to it. Like Dr. Casares, I think, basically, he loses his hearing and he dies. I think maybe within a day or two after that.
Right.
It's pretty fucking harrowing, and that's the scarier thing I think in this movie than Santi. Although I think that on the subject of Santi, I think the design there is great. I think there's one particular sequence I think where he's in the hallway and he's kind of tracking Carlos, the main character, and that's like the first, I think, real good look that we get at the design there. It's kind of got like this cracked porcelain doll type look, and the blood spurt kind of coming out of his head, and like the cloud that it is. Like it's really quite interesting, the design. And then I think this is from watching one of the supplements. I think Del Toro said they always wanted him to have the kind of effect where you can see his skeleton, kind of behind his skin. But he said that it was too expensive, so they couldn't really do that. So they kind of came up with this idea that when the moon shines directly on him, then that's when you would see that aspect of him. So when you do see that, I was like, it's 2001. Looks pretty good. It's as was the case with, I think, the makeup for Jesus and Cronos. It's very striking. It's very striking looking, and I don't know that this movie is quote unquote scary. I think in any sort of traditional aspects of horror, or maybe I've just seen it enough times that it never had that. Doesn't have that effect on it, on me. Maybe it did at one point.
I don't think it's not meant to be a scary movie though.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, I think it plays with those aspects, but I think that it uses them for maybe purposes that, you wouldn't expect him to,
Right, yeah.
So I think that's, maybe I'm just, yeah.
No,
anyway.
No, I think it tells, I don't know, sometimes I get these, like, I try to think about too much shit, my head kind of shuts down a little bit. I should probably start taking notes so they're more fleshed out and I can communicate what I'm trying to think. But I think that the tension and the horror of the film is the unnerving tension throughout it. I think that's what I walk away from it with. I also think that I really enjoy and I don't know if because this is only the second time I've seen the movie, and it's been I don't know, a couple weeks now, I think, since I watched it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The story of the bomb, the war, and the rebellion that's going on outside of the orphanage, and how that bomb is centered with. What am I trying to think here? There's a much deeper story being told, or there's two worlds that are intersecting in this movie, and I think it's incredibly poetic. And I don't think I'm articulate enough to dissect it and pull it apart and verbalize it, but I know it's there. Like the outside world is the rebellion and the war, and that outside world it injects itself into the world of the boys in the orphanage in the form of the bomb. And I think it's really interesting. I think it's really cool. And I think a couple more viewings and actually like sitting down and really trying to, rather than casually watching it with a couple beers, I think sitting down and really doing like an in-depth look at this movie would be really interesting. And I probably should have done that for the podcast, but I didn't. I just casually like kicked back and watched it, and I just enjoyed it. But I think that there's a couple of different underlying things that it's doing, and I think it's really well done. It's just I'm stupid and I can't quite pull it apart with two viewings. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. I think you've kind of hit on things that I would agree with. So even if maybe you're not so fancy with them words, I think you're hitting the mark with kind of your analysis. So I agree. I'm gonna stick up for you.
Oh, well, thank you, man. It feels good. It feels nice.
Yeah.
What was your favorite moment in this one?
I had a moment. I was thinking it was going to be the hallway sequence because I think it's a really interesting sequence, but I wasn't satisfied with that, so I kind of want something that really felt like it really stuck with me. And I think the ending of the movie is something that really sticks with me when you see
it does.
Dr. Casares kind of walk out, and look at them, and it has kind of the closing narration, que es un fantasma, all of that is just really, really great. And the actual the words there, what is a ghost? A tragedy condemned to repeat itself time and time again. The reprise from the beginning with the kind of the ending, kind of tacked onto that. Like that's some hard hitting shit right there. If I do say so myself.
Agree. Yeah, I agree with your favorite moment for sure.
Okay, yeah, it's really, really, really quite compelling. I was watching this movie and I thought it was kind of a little bit slow moving for the first half of it, on my rewatch, and I'm like, yeah, I like this, it's good. But I think once it I think maybe the halfway point, it really, really finds its footing, and then from that point on, it's really, really very, very compelling, and heartbreaking at times. I think like the Santi flashback, we see kind of how that ties in with Jacinto and all the dynamics. Like once everything I think is kind of unveiled, it's all quite spectacular, and really quite affecting storytelling. So I would say hats off to Mr. Del Toro for this fine film here. I'm kind of in the same boat where I'm like, I feel like I'm missing out on a lot of things with this movie. Like maybe maybe it needs a few more viewings for me to kind of like think about more things I think that are worth kind of talking about. But I hope that we've at least covered enough to sell people on watching this movie, because I think it deserves that at a bare minimum.
Yeah, for sure.
So, would you like to slide into our last film that we're going to talk about on this episode?
That's it. 5 years later. After the Devil's Backbone.
Oh, yes, indeed. October of 2006, it was released in Spain. Pan's Labyrinth, of course, is what we're talking about. And I think this one was, it might have been this one was also Mexican and Spanish co-production. So same as Devil's Backbone. Guillermo del Toro wrote and directed this all by his lonesome. And it stars Ivana Baquero, Sergio Lopez, Maribel Verdú, and Doug Jones.
Doug motherfucking Jones. And say I had some Spanish sounding names, and then we got white boy Doug Jones at the end there. 5 years after the Spanish Civil War, the bookish young stepdaughter of a sadistic army officer escapes into an eerie but captivating fantasy world. Pan's Labyrinth, my friend. I think that we saw this in theaters together for the first time. I think that's the first.
I think so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's right. Back in 2006. So how old would we have been? 14, 15-ish, somewhere around there.
Yeah, and I think this might have been one that I had to tell a little fib. Yeah, this is rated R, yeah?
Yes, it is definitely rated R. So you were seeing
I was seeing The Grinch.
I was gonna say what's a G rated film that came out in 2006. Yep, that's what you were seeing.
Oh shit. Anyways, yeah. So this movie has blown me away, I think, every single time I've watched it. I think every single time I've watched this movie, I think I've teared up. Actually, I think I teared up with all three of these movies, to be fair. But this one right here is fucking good. And the music, the score, not that the other ones didn't have anything to write home about the score, because those are good too, okay? But this score is incredible. The cinematography is incredible. The caricature, how do you say this word? Caricature? Is that the word?
I don't know what, probably...
Caricature? Whatever, fuck it. The characters and the way that the mythological the mythic creatures, the way the fucking creatures move. There we go. That's what I'm trying to say. The way that the creatures move and the way they're realized, and this is like all the other two previous movies. This is like the precipice of what he was trying to do. That's what I feel like, anyways. I think it's an incredible movie. And I had not seen it in such a long time, a disgusting amount of time. I haven't seen this movie. And I was floored when I watched it again. Completely captivated. It's just an incredible movie. Probably one of my favorite. Probably. I'd say it's probably one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, you want a hot take from me?
Yeah, go ahead and take it. I'll have your hot take. Do it.
This is one of my favorite films ever made.
No way.
Yes, I have a top 5 that I keep.
You keep in your pocket?
I keep in my back pocket. And Pan's Labyrinth has long had a place in it. And this viewing of it reinforced two things for me. One, that it very much deserves its spot in that top 5. And 2, it had also been far too long since I'd watched this movie. And that is shameful indeed. But you know, we've now rectified that mistake. And
I didn't know this was one of your favorite movies, man. That's pretty cool. Didn't know that.
Well, you know, I think at some point we'll have to have a conversation about maybe some of our favorite movies. I think that might make for a fun episode to do.
That would be a good bonus episode. Yeah, for sure.
So one day. So now people know one of my 5, and it's likely to not change between now and recording that episode at some indeterminate point in the future. But this is, I think, also by default Del Toro's best film that he's done. And it I think this is I think what you're saying. It's everything that he's tried to do and mostly succeeded, I would say, with any of his previous movies, but it's the refinement of everything, put into this movie that to this day is basically like Del Toro's mission statement. Like, this is
This is what he does.
Like it's all the elements of his movies at their finest, and this wrapped up in this movie where there are different things, there's different aspects to it, and they all are equally excellent and vital to making the movie as compelling and as quite spectacular as it turned out. And now that we've had the benefit of like The Shape of Water, I really like The Shape of Water, but I think that this is easily better than The Shape of Water, personally.
I think it's more. I don't necessarily want to say that it's better, but it's more. It's more.
Maybe
me.
it's more your shit. Yeah, that's fair. I think that's fair, but I still stand by kind of what I'm saying. And I don't mean that to, again, discount any of his other works, particularly The Shape of Water, but this to me is just really, really astonishing filmmaking.
There's no other movie like it.
Like there is so much. This is a labor of love. There's so much care poured into every single frame of this film, whether it's just the literal cinematography of it and the way that it's shot, which is exquisite. This is an astonishingly beautiful
Golden
movie.
Globe. Hold on a second. No, Oscar. This is an Oscar winner for Best Achievement in Cinematography by Guillermo Navarro,
who is a frequent collaborator with him. So, I mean, that's well deserved. I don't know what else was nominated that year, but I would be hard pressed to think that something else that was nominated deserved it more than this. Although I think that's probably a good, good nod. But moreover, it's not just the cinematography; it's everything in this movie. The performances here are the human performances that we see here are very astonishing. I think Ivana Baquero.
Is that the little girl?
She's the girl. She was actually in the Shannara Chronicles, which I watched the first season of. She's
totally
a little bit
awesome.
older for that. But she, I think this was like her first acting role,
and it was incredible.
So it wasn't her first, but it was among her first, certainly the biggest, I think, role that she'd had to this point, as a fucking lead character. And she's wonderful in this. I think Del Toro said that, like, when he saw her audition, like she like moved him to tears or something, something along those lines. Like he was like, she was like older than kind of what he wanted for the character, but like he was so moved by her audition that he kind of changed the movie because of her. And like, that's pretty big. But also, I think maybe this is another hot take. You might agree. I think Vidal is one of the scariest villains crafted in film.
He's pretty intense. Yeah,
and I think that's a credit to Sergio Lopez, who is impossibly good in this role, scarily good in this role. But he's, I think Jacinto in Devil's Backbone was a really compelling villain, but Vidal is like next level, just terrifying. I think maybe he's less. I don't think he's sympathetic in the slightest. But I think that whereas Jacinto had kind of had that somewhat of a sympathetic factor to him, that's kind of stripped out of Vidal, and he's just this monster of a man. Like he is the monster in this movie, and goddamn, is he just monstrous.
That's the thing. I think that this character, his father was a soldier. His father died performing, doing soldier shit, and he, and I think that he has a desire to be, kind of be like his dad, and I think that, I don't think he's completely void of he's definitely not sympathetic by any stretch of the imagination, but he's very believable.
But he's not a one-note villain. I think
no.
He's kind of
definitely.
Like he's very three-dimensional, very realized, and I think that he's scary because of that, because he feels like a real person, a real person that's just not a very good person, to say the least.
Right.
The type of person that will take a bottle and smash it into your face and murder you to death. That's the kind of person that he is, because you and your pops were hunting rabbits. That's one thing that definitely stuck with me since watching it. I know the first time we saw it in theaters, that was like a holy
I've never seen that before.
kind of thing.
Still haven't seen it again.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen it since, aside from rewatching this movie. Yeah, there's a couple really violent moments in this movie. Like that one, I think is got to be the worst of it. But also when Mercedes cuts him and gives him kind of half of the Chelsea grin. That always kind of stuck with me too as a pretty crazy moment.
What about when Doug Jones bites the head off a fairy? That was pretty fucking brutal.
It's pretty messed up. Doug Jones, what are you doing? What are you doing, Doug Jones?
It's pretty rough.
Let's talk about Doug Jones since we're talking about Doug Jones. I think that I distinguished my comment about the human performances. I think Doug Jones is fucking absolutely amazing. And his dual roles in this film, he plays the fawn, but he also plays the pale man, which that's probably a conversation in and of itself about that. But I think in terms of the fawn, I think you kind of said something about like the movements of the characters and stuff like that, and like that's pure Doug Jones. That's him.
I wish you could find the quote. Let me see if I can find the quote while you're talking about it. Let's see.
Okay. I mean, that's what the man does. He's made a career for himself of kind of mostly getting buried in prosthetics and adding life to, characters that I would say most of the time don't get that sort of, character added to it. Now, obviously, it's in the context of a Del Toro film where it's written in a way that, there's a lot of character added to him from that standpoint. But the way that you realize these characters makes a big fucking difference. And I think that, I don't know if this is the quote you're talking about, but I think Del Toro basically told him, you must be in this film. Like, no one else can play this part but you, I think is what he told him.
I was looking up a quote.
From the movie itself?
Yeah, from the movie itself.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
And with the fawn, he the way he moves, it's so intricate, but it feels natural, and Ophelia asks who he is. What's your name? And he says, I've had so many names, old names that only the wind and the trees can pronounce. I am the mountain, the forest, and the earth. I am a fawn, your most humble servant, your highness. And it's so fucking, like, the way he moves his arms out to his fingers and shit. And it's just so, and you can hear it creaking and everything like a piece of wood. Oh, it's so fucking good.
Well, and it's interesting too because the actual depiction of him kind of subtly alters throughout the movie too. Mm-hmm. Now, that first introduction I think you're talking about, he's got very kind of robotic, kind of very jerky movements. He's like
he
older
hasn't been, like he hasn't moved in forever.
Yeah, exactly. And he's a little bit more fluid with his movements kind of throughout the movie as. Ophelia becomes closer to I guess rejoining the kingdom or exactly how it's framed.
The underworld, yeah.
The underworld, yeah. So, Doug Jones is a big reason why this movie works as well as it does. He's not the only reason, obviously, but I think you could, if you took him out of the movie and put someone else in there, it'd be hard for me to say that the movie would work as well as it does. You know what I mean? Like, I think that he is still essential, as this part of the movie to making things so believable. The fawn feels like a real character. I mean, it looks like a real character too because it's got some spectacular effects work that's done with it. I mean, I think the only real digital effects they did with it were with the legs. But
right,
it's still. It's really quite it's awe-inspiring, honestly,
awesome.
to see someone like that, immerse themselves in that type of work. And, the guy's probably spending, 4 or 5 hours in the makeup chair, like every day on set. Like, that's some serious fucking dedication, and he does that for like 90% of the roles that he does. Like, that's wild. That's insane. Dude's a madman, but the best kind of madman. And his brief stint as the Pale Man as well is also quite astonishing. I think that for most people, and probably me included, when you just say Pan's Labyrinth, people think about the pale man. You think about him with the eyes and the hands, and kind of holding him to the face, and the fingers kind of moving around a little bit. I'm doing it as I record right now. No one can see me doing it, but I'm doing it. And the design. I mean, the designs here are all fucking spectacular, obviously, and I'm sure at least a good amount of that was founded in Del Toro's imagination, and was probably refined through the production process, but. The design of the Pale Man is very, very interesting. Like, he's like this very emaciated figure who, he's got this, the flaps of skin. So maybe at one point he wasn't, maybe he was a little bit fatter when he was eating, some more children on the reg, but I don't know, man. And it's not just the creatures. I mean, obviously the creatures are the fawn in particular. I think the design of that is, I don't know, man. I fucking love it. I'll put it that way. But the whole design of the underworld and all of the kind of tasks that Ophelia goes through, and even just the realistic, kind of settings here. The town that they're in, and kind of when they go into the forest and they're kind of have these confrontations with the rebels and everything. Like, it's all. It's not just that it's well shot. It's that it's well shot, and it has just an amazing design to all of it. So I don't know if this thing won any fucking awards for production design or anything like that, but I think that it would have deserved that too.
Yeah,
I just love this film, man. Yeah, it brought me to tears, and I think that it's the kind of movie that. It has that lasting impact enough where, even if I hadn't seen it in a few years, I'm like, no, that's one of my favorite films. Even if maybe a week ago I couldn't have really articulated exactly why it was, there's a reason it was there. There's a reason it had so much impact on me, and that's why it kind of, it kind of, put itself in that spot. And now that I've seen it again, very recently, it's kind of just like, yeah, of course it was there. Duh. Yeah. Like, don't doubt yourself. You know what you're talking about. It's really, it's a beautiful film. I wish I had more free time right now to watch it more often. I guess
just
if nothing else,
again, right?
Because I could easily see myself watching this, multiple times. It's phenomenal, and it's touching and heartbreaking and scary and all the right ways. It hits, I think, a lot of emotions. I think it hits a lot of beats that really hit home. It's really just I would say kind of a breathtaking piece of cinema, and I stand by my statement. I definitely think this is Del Toro's finest. Like, it feels personal, and it feels just so well realized.
It's a fairy tale, man. It's like a modern day fucking fairy tale. And it's incredibly well rounded. And I think this is why I think this movie right here is probably, yeah, this is the reason why this, and I guess there's other reasons, but this movie is the reason why he's one of my favorite directors. It's one thing to make a movie; it's another to like, I don't know, just have a self-contained mythos in a movie, and it just, I don't know how to describe it, but and I think that what's your takeaway? What do you take away with it? How do you look into Ophelia? Is she like the ending there where she doesn't see the fawn? Or he goes
where the captain doesn't see it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So actually I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something I wanted to talk about, and kind of in the moment didn't think to talk about it. So good call. I think that when I first saw this movie in theaters, the way I read the movie was that it wasn't real. And I think maybe it's just because I was a cynical teenager and I didn't want to believe in fairy tales, maybe. And so it kind of felt like a very dark ending to me, where like, you know, the world was such a shitty place that this was her escape.
Right.
And it was only really kind of cemented by the fact that the captain couldn't see it. I was just like, well, of course it wasn't real. You know, it was just like, this is her way of kind of coping. And so that's the way I read the movie in 2006. In 2018, I do not subscribe to that reading of the movie. I fully buy into the fantasy world being a thing. And I think that that's also the reading that Del Toro ascribes to more strongly. Now, he obviously made the movie in a way that it could go either way. I don't think it's necessarily I don't think that there's one strict interpretation of this movie, and I think you can justify it in you know, whichever way that you kind of choose to see it. But I think it makes for I guess maybe I'm a sucker for happier endings, and I think it's definitely a much happier reading of the story for Ophelia to become the Princess Moana, you know, in the underworld. And I think it kind of, I don't think it undercuts some of the emotions that the characters are feeling, and you know, like Mercedes is like crying with her body at the end, and like, I don't think that, you know, if you say Ophelia is going to this other world, I don't think it takes away from that moment, because for all intents and purposes, she is dead on Earth. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And so I still see it as I think it. I don't know. There's some things to me, like I think the Mandrake in particular would be kind of hard to explain that if you didn't say that the whole thing was real. Like you could say that like the medicine was getting the mother, you know, she just started to respond to the treatment basically. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the captain physically interacts with the Mandrake, and I'm kind of just like, well, where does that come from? And like the chalk doors, there's a couple times where it's just like, how would she actually physically navigate this thing if that wasn't actually what was happening? Like what we see was not actually happening. So my answer is I think that the underworld is a real place. I think that the fantastical elements are kind of actually happening. So that's where I land on that.
I got you.
I think that's what you're asking. I think I got on a rant there for a few minutes, but I'm pretty sure that was what the question was about.
No, that was the question. How do you feel about that? I like the fable portions of it, like the like, for example, and I think there's other portions of this movie that are, I think that this one's more easily dissected than Devil's Backbone, and I think that's because it's more refined. But I don't have all the dissections available, but I do have one, and I think this one's really easy. So she goes and sees the pale man. He's got a table full of food and delicious things. He has no eyes, and his eyes are in his hands. And the whole don't be greedy. Don't touch what's not yours. Right? And it's like the whole fable with this thing that you don't have. That you don't act out on your greed, right? Or your gluttony. I guess he's a very gluttonous thing, I suppose. He only sees with his hands and what he can grab and touch and everything, you know? Maybe it's like a poetic thing. But at the same time, with the war, do you remember what was happening on the same time on the war front? While she was going to go in there and grab that knife?
I just watched it yesterday, so I feel like I should, but you can refresh my memory.
At the same time, on the war front, in the quote unquote real world, she had given the key to the fucking barn with all the medical supplies and all the other shit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and she says, don't go in there and don't grab that stuff, because then he'll know, blah, 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 blah. And what do? They make a couple distractions, and they go in there, and they go grab that shit. You know? And that feels like a direct parallel to what she's doing. Go in there, do this, don't do anything, here's a key, and go in there and grab what you need, but do not touch this or that. You know what I mean? And at the same time, the rebels are expected not to go grab the medicine for that guy or whatever. And I think that that's like the doorway there to where there's like layers to the movie, and I think that's really fascinating. I think, you know, you watch it again and you look for one thing in particular, you could pull something out of it, and every time you watch it you can pull more and more and more out of it. Like you watched it when, you know, and the first time we watched it, and you thought that it was you were cynical about it. Second time you watch it, you feel completely different about it, and I think that that's a sign of a very well made movie. Depending on how you are when you watch it, or how you feel going into it, you can pull something else from it. And I think that's what makes it transcends the visual medium of the movie. You know, that's what makes a good story. It's what makes an excellent, well written story. You read a book, or you read whatever you read a poem, or you read any sort of thing. Right, and depending on how you go in, if it's multifaceted, you can pull different things from it, and this is one of those movies, without a doubt. And it's incredible. It really is incredible. Written and directed by Guillermo del Toro. It's fucking awesome.
It's his masterpiece.
It is his masterpiece. I completely feel that way. I kind of feel that way about
magnum opus.
I really like The Shape of Water as well. I think that's another fairy tale movie.
You really can't go wrong with most Del Toro films. I honestly think that's a fair statement. But so, I think there are tiers, you know, but yeah.
But this one's more my speed. This is a fairy, like if you had two books, you got the Pan's Labyrinth, or you got The Shape of Water. Well, I'm going to want to read Pan's Labyrinth just because I think it's very interesting. I like the setting. I like the period. Well, I guess they're similar periods, I guess. But it's more, I don't know. It's just more
different settings though.
Yeah, but it's more fantastical, you know? Like you have these ancient ruins that have been around, and they're fucking portals to the underworld. It's fucking crazy shit, man. It's really cool. And then you have a really, really heartbreaking, heavy story. Not that the other one's not heartbreaking and heavy, but this is just fucking, I don't know, it hurts your heart, but then at the same time, you're really happy by the end of it because, you know, she's reunited with her father and her mom. And it's just, I don't know, man. It's really fucking good. So if you haven't seen this movie and you want to watch any of his movies, watch this, because this one is incredible. Super good movie. It's my take. One of my favorite movies.
Well, sounds like when we get to that episode, we'll have some common ground to talk about.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this.
Okay.
What's your favorite moment in Pan's Labyrinth? I think I've answered first for the first couple movies, so I didn't want to steal your thunder in case we had the same
you can
thing.
steal my thunder. You go ahead and talk. I got to think about this.
You got to think about it.
Yeah.
Well, this was another actually very similar scenario to The Devil's Backbone, where I think that the first thing I think about again when I see this movie, or when I think about this movie rather, is the Pale Man sequence. And I think it's a really, really great sequence. I think it's really astonishing, and I can see, because it's so visually spectacular, why that would be the thing that I would carry with me, and why most people I think would carry it with them. But I wouldn't say that it's my favorite moment.
I know my favorite moment. I'm going to cut you off.
All right. Well, is it the Pale Man, or is it something else?
No, it's something else.
All right. Well, then, yeah. Let's say I'll let you speak, because I'm curious to see if we'll actually agree or not. So,
okay. My favorite moment. And it's kind of a couple of them, but it starts out with the fairy. The fairy exposes herself at the statue when she's on her way in the very beginning or whatever, and then it comes to her at that night, and it pulls her through guides her through the maze, you know, through the labyrinth.
El laberinto.
And she goes down and meets the fawn for the first time. I think her first introduction to the fawn was really fucking cool. That's probably one of my favorite. That's what I'm going to say. Yeah,
it's a really good interaction. The performances there really, really awesome. So that's a good shout. I I agree and disagree with that. I agree that could easily be one of my favorite moments.
But it's not.
It's not. It's not the one I was thinking of, so I'm not going to say that it is. I'm actually going to kind of cop my response from The Devil's Backbone and say that the ending of this movie is my favorite moment.
That's really good.
And in particular, I think the juxtaposition of Mercedes kind of, crying over Ophelia's body on, in Spain and in kind of the actual earthly plane that we tend to associate ourselves with. But that with the actual reunion with her mother and father, with the fawn looking very excited and very happy and youthful at the end. Especially now that I, think like happy endings are good. I like the happy ending here. Everything is real. She is not just in like her existence, her thought of heaven or something like that. Like no, this is real. Like she's actually there. I'm like, it's a really, really affecting ending in the sense that like I was tearing up because I was happy because she's in a better place.
But goddamn, it felt so sad too at the same time.
But you still feel the very real pain from the human characters there, where Mercedes was kind of like a surrogate mother to her because her mother kind of hadn't really kind of been that kind of character since from the beginning of the movie when they go out to live with the captain and all that. So it's a lot of different types of emotions, I think, kind of getting you get kind of exposed in that moment, and I think that makes for really complex cinema, and I think that's why I kind of identified that as my favorite moment. So
what about the fucking lullaby, dude?
Yes, that's yeah. I mean, like, yeah, that's just another thing to kind of throw into
that
the mix,
reoccurring theme. Yeah. Holy fuck. Oh.
Yeah.
So good.
I mean, I wish I was just like a tenth as talented as Guillermo del Toro. Like I wish that I had that man's creativity and just I don't know if it's just somewhat, I guess, off subject, but there was one of the special features I think it was Cronos, where it's del Toro like running through his production office, I think is what it was, and he just has like a million fucking things on display from some of his movies and things that he likes, and it's just like,
have you seen the dude's house?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So I think he said at one point it was in his house, but then like his family was just like, so he ended up moving it, I think, to one of his production offices.
Oh, okay.
So
right.
It's just it's just decorated with nothing but creatures and crazy maquettes and everything, like just everywhere.
It's amazing.
Like, anywhere the eye can see, and I'm just like,
it's fucking cool.
That's his brain kind of put into a physical setting in some ways.
It's
like,
his dreams fucking come true, man.
That's just how he is. Yeah, like that. I don't know. I think he's just a really inspiring, not just director, but I think he's a really inspiring person. I think that.
Yeah.
And I think it's a damn shame that as much as I've loved all his projects, I think it's a shame that he's written a lot of things or tried to do a lot of things that never actually kind of ended up happening, or at least in the way that they were supposed to. Silent Hills is something that comes to mind as a video game that,
he's got countless movies and stuff, though. He's supposed to make The Hobbit
movies,
too,
yeah. He was supposed to do The Hobbit, which I think he was going to do 2 movies instead of the 3 that it ended up being, and I guarantee it would have been significantly better had he actually made them himself. At the Mountains of Madness, I think would if you could give the man an actual budget to actually let him do that, that would have been fucking, I think, mind-blowing. I mean, we're talking about things that obviously didn't happen, so it's it's just wild, rampant speculation, but at the same time, like, can you imagine Del Toro plus Lovecraft?
Yeah,
like,
that would be that is the director to do Lovecraft, I think.
Absolutely. Like, yeah, I think if you let Del Toro do Lovecraft, like, you wouldn't be able to let anyone do it again because there's just no way they could compare.
No. Let him write it too, obviously, because he can write a fucking movie. Man,
but
what a fucking awesome guy.
He's doing Pinocchio, I think, next. I think
that's pretty exciting.
About that
a
few episodes back. So,
and I think he's been like working on this project for a long time. So, pretty excited about it, man. I really like these director bonus episodes.
Well, maybe we'll have to do another one of them. I don't know when. We haven't talked about what we're going to do for our next bonus episode, so
Yeah.
maybe that's a conversation to be had. But I think we can kind of just express some final thoughts here before we wrap everything up for this episode. So, I guess would you say that Pan's Labyrinth is your favorite of these three movies?
Yes.
That seems like a fair assumption to make. Okay. Yeah, and I think maybe instead of asking you to rank these movies, because I don't I think they're all really good. I think we kind of started the episode, at least I started the episode by kind of pointing that out. It's no surprise that these are all really well made, really good movies. But I would say, how much separation do you think there is between these three movies that we talked about? Like, do you think there's a lot of separation, or do you think they're all kind of in the ballpark together?
Separation and quality?
Yeah. Or maybe different aspects, quality, appeal, however you feel.
I don't know. I think it's a natural progression. From good, better, best,
Yeah.
I think it works in the way the guy's making movies. The first movie set the stage. The second movie kind of set his thematic precedent for what he for this is his style. And then the third one says, this is the fucking grand finale. This is what it is. This is what I hope to make every time I make a movie. And that's kind of my take on it. I think that as just with these three films, I think you can see a tremendous amount of progress in his storytelling. And I think the bar was set very high with Cronos. I don't want to sound down on Cronos because I've always loved Cronos. For a long time, for years I've loved Cronos. But I think he's just progressed as a storyteller. And that's pretty much my take on it. I think that Cronos is that raw. You have Guillermo del Toro. He's a very creative person. He knows how to write characters, and he has interesting thoughts about in direction stories can go and different takes on things that have been covered before, right? And then you have Devil's Backbone, which you have all the same things, but now you have layers on the story. Now you have I don't know if duplicity is the word, but you have you got multiple stories being told within it. And I think the depth of the Devil's Backbone is what makes it so good. Also, I think you get more of a cinematic kind of style. You can kind of start to see things being used, like the color palette. The color palette, after you watch The Shape of Water, you've come to know what his style is, right? I think The Devil's Backbone's where you can start to see something developing. And then you get to Pan's Labyrinth. Now you've got a tremendous score, which I think Shape of Water won something for the score.
Yeah, I think it won Best Original Score for Academy Awards.
Right. So now you have that. You've got cinematography. I think I don't know if Shape of Water did anything for cinematography, but I do know that I think it won something with set design, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
I know that it got Best Picture. I know that it got Best Director, the score. I'm not sure that it won for anything else. I know it was nominated, I think, definitely for a few other things. But
anyways, you get the
fact check. Oh no, I lied. It did win for Best Production Design. I'm wrong.
Okay,
right.
Yep. So you got that, and you can start to see where Pan's Labyrinth really he starts to really step into his own. Where now in 2000 and I guess 17 was when Shape of Water came out.
Late 17.
Yeah. Now you have somebody that's on the world stage, and he's perfected his craft. And And not that Pan's Labyrinth isn't perfected, because in my personal opinion, I think Pan's Labyrinth is an absolutely incredible movie, and I think it's perfection. I think it's completely fucking awesome. But you can just see the progression of a filmmaker, and it's actually really fucking interesting. It's really cool. Just to track that kind of progress, because there's definite progress being made. You can see his eye for things being developed, and I think it's really cool. If you're remotely interested, you can pick up this wonderful Blu-ray collection and check it out for yourself. But it's I don't know, man. You could fucking write an essay on the progress of filmmaking, because it's evident in these three movies. Yeah.
Turn it then tomorrow.
Nope.
I'll read it.
Nope. No memos for me. What do you think, man? I kind of ranted a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I need to rant much more than you just did. I think you hit on a lot of things that are absolutely correct. And I think that there's a reason that the Criterion Collection decided to put these three movies together, because I think it is a really strong encapsulation of Del Toro as a filmmaker, and when it's kind of a way to track his progress throughout the years. You talked about this. You see him going from, like you said, good to better to best, and I think that's really, really a good, succinct way of putting it. And obviously, it maybe doesn't do Cronos as much justice, like you said, as maybe it needs, but it is a good way of framing things where you see the perfection of the craft, and I'm glad that these movies are available in such a really, really nice set, and high quality. I mean, it's not 4K, don't get me wrong, but I don't think Criterion does 4K releases. I could be wrong on that, but it's a beautiful set. I think that if anyone's interested in watching these movies, it's a really nice set to have. I think it technically is like MSRP at $100, which I think is kind of steep for three movies. But Criterion usually runs 50% off sales a few times a year. Sometimes it's through their own website. Sometimes it's through Barnes & Noble. And so I would say that whenever any of those sales happen, it would be a great time to pick it up. That's what I did for myself. It's what I ended up doing for you. So it's worth owning. These movies are not just worth watching. I think they're worth owning. That there's something that you can put in your collection. And granted, both of us are big on physical media. But still, I think that even people that have moved to streaming, I think that there's, it's not your standard Blu-ray set.
No,
it's a little bit more. The booklet, and it is. I flipped through it. I didn't read the whole thing. I kind of wanted to, but. What I did see in it was very interesting. I think there's a lot of like director's notes, and it just shows you like the level of detail that Del Toro puts into like character number 4 in a movie. Like he's got a whole fucking backstory that's never explained in the movie, but that's what the actor sees. That's what the actor knows, and that's how Del Toro knows to tell them like, oh, that character wouldn't do this in this moment. He would do this instead. I'm like, well, how would you know that? I'm like, because he's made the fucking real person. That's what he does.
That's and so the Cronos Criterion that I have, it goes into that stuff, man, and it's
I think that the trilogy booklet I think is probably partially reprinted from that, because there's a lot of just like pages of just like character backstories and stuff like that. It's really insane,
fucking cool.
Dude has incredibly vivid imaginations. It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
It is wonderful.
We are very thankful that Guillermo del Toro
lives.
Is yeah. We are thankful that Guillermo del Toro is. Period. Full stop.
Yeah, no, but it just goes to say that when people pursue their passions, that the whole world I don't want to say that I'm the whole world, but I think I'm not alone in saying Guillermo del Toro is an incredibly talented dude, and I've benefited from experiencing his passion. I think that when somebody has a passion for something and they go out and pursue it, and I don't know, like he does it the way he's. I don't know what I'm trying to say. When he makes something that he puts his heart into, it doesn't feel like he makes compromises, in these movies. Now, I think he's probably earned the right not to have to compromise, especially now that he's got, he has Pan's Labyrinth and he's got Shape of Water. But at the same time, I think he's an incredibly interesting dude, and he makes really good movies, and he's an excellent storyteller, and he has a passion for the craft, and I think it's awesome. And I don't think there's a lot of filmmakers like him.
No, and I think, if I may presume to say, I think it's fair to say that you and I wouldn't have a podcast about movies and TV shows that's run for 60 plus episodes if we didn't have people like Guillermo del Toro making movies. Like he is, and people of his ilk are that's why we like to sit here and talk for 2 hours about movies that we like, because if people didn't pour that sort of passion into their work, we wouldn't have any sort of passion about talking about it, Right. So, yeah, I think that's maybe a good way to end it.
All right. Yeah, definitely.
Otherwise, we're going to spend another 15 minutes talking about how great he is, and I think we firmly established that.
he's paying us along with Marvel, by the way. We're waiting for our Guillermo del Toro checks.
So thank you all for listening. Again, if you're a supporter on Patreon, it's awesome. We appreciate your support. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to us a little bit ahead of everyone else. If you are part of that, everyone else, not a problem. We appreciate you listening to us in any way you can. Podcasts are free. That's the beauty of the medium. And if that's the way you choose to listen to us, then we do not fault you. We do this, again, because we have a passion for things, and that's enough to motivate us. Simple as that, So if you did enjoy what you heard, we would encourage you to spread the word. Social media. Tell your friends if you have friends. Probably have friends, right? Tell your friends if you have friends. You can direct them to our website, which is www.watchreviewrepeat.com. If you'd like to, you could also follow us on Twitter at WRRPod, like us on Facebook. If you need further directions to the Patreon, if you're sold, you said, all right, say no more, fam. I want to support you on Patreon. All you got to do is again head to our website, click the premium tab, and then click the become a patron button. It's very simple. $2 a month. Bonus episodes, early access to regular episodes. Good deal. Good deal for all. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, we encourage you to send those our way to our Gmail account, which is watchreviewrepeat@gmail.com. Our intro and outro track is graciously provided by Kevin MacLeod. It is called Mechanolith. It is licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. And as we've previously mentioned, we don't have a bonus episode set up for next month, so we're gonna have to sit down and figure that out. See what we want to talk about. Got some good ideas on the table, obviously, from this episode. So maybe we'll do one of those, or maybe we'll do something else entirely. Who knows? We'll figure it out. Just stay tuned for our social medias for announcements of that. If you're listening to this sometime down the road, we've probably already announced it, in which case, that's what we're doing. So there you go. So yeah, I think that's going to do it for me. Andrew, what have you to say to our listeners?
Ladies on the Minjay.